Um, okay, so in the Islamic world, there's been contributions to the world
Mm-hmm.
that many people won't like to admit
Mm-hmm.
that it comes from an Arab world or an
Mm-hmm.
Arab scholar. Um, so, can you give me an example of a couple of those?
Oh, sure. First of all, the Western world gives Latinized names to many of these Muslim scholars. They talk about them in the history books, but they give them Latinized names, and it's never mentioned that they're Muslims. So Ibn Sina is known in the West as Avicenna. Ibn Rushd is known as Averroes. So the Muslim identity of these people is obscured or not mentioned. Another example, one that might be closer to your own heart coming from Mexico, is that there's a very famous person that came with the conquistadors named Estevanico of Azamor. And Spanish language movies have been made about him. Yet his real name was Mustafa Lamora. And he was a Muslim slave from Morocco. And that he's one of the great heroes of American history.
um, so, what would you think um, if you could give me a comparison between the East and the West cultures? What would be the differences and the similitudes?
Well, again, I think on a macro level, as I mentioned before, the Middle Eastern cultures are primarily collectivist cultures. Europe and the United States are primarily individualist cultures. Each has good and bad aspects to being that way.
Um, how how do you believe that the spreading of Islam should be dawah? How that what kind of way could that be done in a positive way?
Well, I think, let me back up and say, first of all, Dawah is being done every minute of the day by almost every Muslim in America. Because whether by name or accent or dress or grooming, we're all recognized as being Muslims in our home communities, at our work, at our schools, etc. And people look at our behavior, look at all of our behavior, and rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly, they say that behavior is Islam. So we're always doing dawah. The only question is, are we doing good dawah or bad dawah? Personally, I think the most effective dawah that any Muslim can do is one's behavior. The example of Jamal and my first meeting of him, um, but little things. It can be many different things. But people look at us, and if our behavior is right, if our behavior is correct, if our behavior is admirable, we're doing dawah, and we're doing good dawah. Um, on a more formal basis, in terms of discussing Islam, I think it's important to make the first step one of finding common ground. So if you're talking to a Christian, it's important to show the common ground between Christianity and Islam. Um, you can even quote Bible verses and quote the parallel verse from the Quran or from the Ahadith, etc. Because once you establish the common ground, then the listener can begin to identify with you. And if they identify with you, then they're going to be much more receptive when you do start talking about the differences that exist between their religion and your religion. Unfortunately, I think some of our brothers and sisters want to begin the discussion with the differences and want to start that discussion by saying, you're wrong. And that is not an effective way to do dawah.
That's true. Um, okay, so this documentary will be shown in Ramadan,
Mm-hmm.
inshallah. And so, is there anything that you can add for the people in Turkey, or one question I asked you was, what do you think about the ban of hijab in Turkey? And when I had my interview, that was one of my points because I think hijab should be a right, not an obligation, neither prohibition. So, what would you, as a man, as a Muslim man, what would you tell the women in Turkey about wearing a hijab?
Well, first of all, let me say this. I think that too often we have men telling women what they should be doing with regards to hijab. I believe, that since I don't wear one, and no one says I should wear one, I'm really not in a position of authority to speak on that issue. I think that really should come from our knowledgeable sisters. As a general principle, of course, I am against laws that ban the wearing of a scarf, whether in Turkey or France or where have you.
And would you just give me one more statement about Ramadan? What would you tell the people in Turkey after Ramadan? Well, not just Turkey, because you play in other countries as well. So, is there anything you want to say to Muslims and other countries from Ramadan? Any wishes? Anything? Any extra that you want to?
Well, certainly Ramadan Mubarak. But also, inshallah, to remember that Ramadan's more than just refraining from food and drink and the intake of substances from dawn to dusk. Ramadan is also supposed to be a time of spiritual reflection, of devoted reading of the Quran.